When people look at St. Louis, probably the first thing that comes to mind is the image of the Gateway Arch. It's our internationally recognized symbol of the city. But far fewer people probably know that once upon a time, it was one of many, many different possibilities of what could have stood on the St. Louis riverfront. The story of the Gateway Arch's rise spans across decades and is a fascinating story of many different decisions being made. If they had gone just slightly differently, we might have had something much different standing on St. Louis's riverfront today. In the 1930s, St. Louis's city leaders looked across the old and dirty St. Louis riverfront and thought to themselves, what if we could replace all of this with a monument to westward expansion and Thomas Jefferson and St. Louis's important role in the widening of the United States? By the late 1930s, they had actually secured federal funding for this idea, and they managed to tear down the entire St. Louis riverfront. More than 400 buildings across 40 blocks came down in the course of just 2 years. It's an amazing loss to our city's history when we look at it today, but at the moment, they did not see these structures as having any future value. So they had this big blank open spot on the riverfront, but even at that time, still nobody knew what this memorial was going to look like. It would take about a decade later before they opened up an architectural competition to design the St. Louis Riverfront Memorial. There were 172 different entries from all across the United States. They were chosen by a panel of 7 judges that included architects and city planners and other people who were interested in this. There were 2 rounds of competition, and the judges looked at all of the different entries. Each entrant was only allowed to present 2 big boards that told the entire story of their project, and that was all the judges knew and had to choose from. Young Eero Saarinen was a Michigan architect trying desperately to get his first big commission and break out from beneath the shadow of his much more famous father, Eliel Saarinen, who was also an architect, and he chose to enter the St. Louis Riverfront Memorial Competition. He came up with this idea of St. Louis being a gateway, and he started to play around with the idea of an arch. Had the competition only been 1 round, the arch probably wouldn't be the icon we think of it as today. His original arch was only about 300 feet tall instead of more than 600 feet tall. It was much more semicircular, almost like a rainbow, and it would have been made out of concrete instead of encased in stainless steel. So I can only imagine what the 50-year-old concrete arch on the riverfront would have looked like today. It wasn't until the second round of competition that Eero Saarinen unveiled the stainless steel skin and made it much more taller and graceful. The judges unanimously chose him the winner in the second round of competition, but he had some very stiff competition. Looking at the story of the Gateway Arch and how it was chosen from, again, 171 other possibilities for what could have been on the riverfront, this iconic design, we can't imagine anything else standing there today. Once upon a time, just a few people making a decision could have seen that changed very drastically.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org.